Well, that was quite the show. This is your Sound Off Extra review for Raw 25, the special 25-year anniversary episode of Monday Night Raw. Also the Go Home show, the Go Home Raw, to the Royal Rumble this Sunday. I am the Solomonster. This was a show where WWE tried to basically fit 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. 3-hour show, lots of cameo appearances, lots of nostalgia acts, and all of their current talent trying to fit everything in that they wanted to. And overall, what you end up with here are some memorable segments. I can't sit here and everything sucked. There were a lot of really cool moments on this show. The problem is, you take away the nostalgia, and this show sucked. This show really was not a good show. Even with the nostalgia, some people might say it wasn't that good of a show. I think the big feeling coming out of it for me is just one of disappointment. This was one where I felt that they could have done a lot more. They could have handled the whole dual location thing a lot better. We're going to get to the Raw poll here. I have a Raw poll up on Twitter, @Solomonster. Already a ton of reaction and not good. So we're going to wait until the end of the review. I'll come back to it, let you guys know what you had to say, what you thought of the show overall. But right now, it ain't trending too well. And before I get into the rest of my review, we had a correspondent on hand at the Manhattan Center. Oh, this should be good. He's a friend of the podcast, Noah Mark. I'm going to get him on the phone here for a few minutes just to get the live perspective, since there's so much talk now coming out of the Manhattan Center portion of the show. I want to get him on the phone just for a few minutes and get his feedback as to what was actually going on inside the building, especially when they were cut away to the Barclays Center. Was it really as bad as some people are saying? Let's get him on the line right now and find out.
Solomonster, oh Solomonster.
Hello, hello.
Manhattan here for post-Raw 25.
So let me ask you a question here. How pissed are you right now?
Well, look, Solomonster, here's...
So you tried to convince me... Hold on. You tried to convince me to go to this show, and I had intuition. There was something that told me, you know what, I ought to watch this at home. I gotta do the review on YouTube after. I'm good. You guys go and have fun.
Let me tell you the best part of the night. The best part of the night was watching Stone Cold Steve Austin on the screen stun Shane and Vince McMahon. It was the best segment of the night.
My same thought, even watching from home. The show peaked with that opening segment.
When you start with a segment like that, and you don't have compelling characters after Vince McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin, there's only one way to go, unless you're going to, I mean, how do you save the show? With The Rock, maybe?
Well, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, you have to come up with more nostalgia acts, because there's nothing I think that they can do with the current talent on the roster as far as like a show ender that would have kind of made people happy. You open the show with one of the biggest names of all time, you're pretty much only going to go downhill from there.
You mean Braun Strowman throwing Brock Lesnar into a table is not a good show ender, or not more important than Stone Cold Steve Austin?
It's more important, or at least it should be. And I think under normal circumstances, that wouldn't be a terrible ending. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it just felt, when that show ended, and maybe it was just because it went so long, I don't know, but it kind of felt underwhelming by that point.
This was not a good Raw.
No, it really wasn't. You strip away all of the nostalgia, what are you left with? A shit sandwich, Solomonster. And I'll tell you, when we showed up to the Barclays Center, we were pleasantly surprised to see that not only our seats, but every seat in the Barclays Center, or did I just say Barclays Center? You did.
The Manhattan Center. I think I wanted to be at the Barclays Center.
Yes, you wish you were at the Barclays Center.
Well, look, for me, this was a nostalgia tour here with Brian Blade. We went to the first ever Monday Night Raw. We were promoting the hell out of this. We went to the first ever Monday Night Raw. And surprisingly, I felt like we were the only people that went to the first ever Monday Night Raw and then went to this Raw, because nobody seemed to be there that, except us, that admitted to this.
Shocking.
Everybody else.
Shocking that all of those people that used to watch wrestling no longer watch wrestling. One of the things I was trying to look for Vladimir the superfan. I didn't see him anywhere.
I was looking for him too, and I have to say that I looked all over for him. I couldn't find him. I couldn't find anyway. I saw Frank the Clown. I saw a Brock Lesnar guy, and I saw our our friend John Glick, the world's longest WWE fan. I don't know.
Oh my God! You know, I think what you just said hit the nail right on the head there. You know, we're talking about Vladimir. We're talking about the good old days. When you're left with Frank the Clown and Brock Lesnar fan, you know that wrestling has fallen from its heyday.
And Brock Lesnar wasn't even there. The Brock Lesnar fan was at the wrong arena. I mean, look, we came there. We knew that the event was not going to be, solely at the Manhattan Center. In fact, it was pretty close that for 1 hour, we were going to get 1 hour of television time cumulatively. But I have to say, by I was reviewing some of it just before you called here. By 50 minutes in, all that had happened inside our arena, aside from a beginning bump with Jerry the King Lawler and JR, which we didn't hear, we were just yelling and screaming, but we didn't hear. They did a cruiserweight match for, if it was 180 seconds, I think I was being generous. At some point during a commercial break, off air, just with the crowd, they brought out no-name cruiserweights to the home and the original Monday Night Raw.
Well, people were. Let me ask you about that, because people were uploading videos, and you did too, during the show from the Manhattan Center. People getting very restless. At one point, they were, starting bullshit chants and all these chants, and they were very upset. I mean, is that your sense as far as when they were showing stuff from Barclays? I mean, I know they were showing cruiserweight matches, but cruiserweight matches aside, was there really nothing else going on? Was it just people watching on a screen for most of the time? There was really nothing going on. There were people watching from a screen. You know what was funny is that every time they came to the Manhattan Center, we were live or whatever, but every time they switched over to Barclays, they had to, for the people on the stage, because if you remember, there's people, opposite the hard camera that are, kind of perched up on a stage. There's no screen behind them, so they had to drag out. I wanted to film this, but I never got a chance to. They had to drag out these big screen TVs and put them on the side so that the people on the stage could see it. And I swear, if they didn't do this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 times, it was just a comedy. No, I've tweeted, the last tweet I think I got to tweet before my phone died was, I've relegated the fact that I paid $250 for a seat. We got a commemorative seat to watch Raw for free on TV. The wrestling was free on TV, and I paid for a seat because we had a 205. It was a 205 live house show, is what it was. A couple of cruiserweight matches, Matt Hardy versus Bray Wyatt, which was our main event, essentially. Well, I guess then we also had the Revival against what's his name? Exactly.
But the sentiment is they could have done more.
Yeah, it's just a matter of they had so many names and faces that they promoted, and look, a lot of them were older legends who probably shouldn't be wrestling. It's not like all of them were in ring shape, but they promoted so many names for this show. And they had access to the SmackDown because it was all hands on deck. So you had SmackDown guys, most of which seemingly were at the Barclays Center, not doing anything. There really is no excuse to have that, amount of downtime for the people who paid so much money to go to that show. There's really no excuse for it.
Yeah, and it's not even the downtime. It's just the quality of what they had. I mean, it's all for you.
Well, hold on a second, but let me ask you this. Before I let you go, let me ask you this, because you were at the first Raw back in '93, right? That was, at least as far as what aired on TV, that was an hour-long show that had matches like Coco Beware against Yokozuna and The Undertaker against Damien Demento. So if I'm playing devil's advocate here, how is something like this worse or different than the kind of show that you would have gotten in the Manhattan Center back then?
Well, because it was the only show. We weren't competing against Bret Hart and Owen Hart versus Rick Rude. They could have done this all at the Manhattan Center and not tried for the money grab and get it from the Barclays Center too and make their money. They could have. I don't see any reason why they couldn't have done it for one night. God forbid they do it one night in the Manhattan Center.
Yeah, and even if you jack up prices even more, at least you're getting the full show from the one location. Look, I think the moral of the story is they needed to level the playing field more than they did. And so you have a lot of people who feel burned. And look, there may be some people there who are very happy with the show. But I could tell you, just looking at the early poll results that I put up, a lot of people not very happy with this show.
This Raw was not good. It was not a good Raw.
No.
And you know something? If you're someone that watched Raw all these years, the so-called lapsed fan that they always love to refer to, and they whore the hell out of the Attitude Era, if they tried to bring back any lapsed fan tonight on a nostalgia kick by showing Raw 25, I am so sorry, but I don't feel that they brought anybody in to do anything.
No. All it would have done is just, confirm to people, hey, this is why I don't watch Raw anymore. And that's the problem.
Well, anyway, unfortunately, it was a thumbs down show. I do have the chair to show for it, so I'll always remember. It's funny because this chair, I think I tweeted a photo of the chair. The chair has Raw 25, the Raw 25 logo on it, and on the seat portion of the chair, it has about 3 dozen superstars, and 5 of them actually were at the Manhattan Center.
Well, who's on the chair? Like any women's wrestlers on the chair?
Yeah, Charlotte Flair. We've got the Boss. We've got Stephanie McMahon.
Okay. All right. Well, look. If nothing else, you'll always have that chair to remember the show by, and you can sit on Stephanie's face, and there you go. So at least you have your you have your token from Raw 25.
Thank you, Solomonster.
All right. I'm going to let you go and get back to my the rest of my review here, and I'll see you in New Orleans. All right. Thank you to Noah for taking the time for that. So let's dive into this show here right off the bat. The first thing I noticed, we got the Raw Siren showing on the air. We got the Raw Siren. We got the Ico Pro banner. We got the old look and feel of the show from the Manhattan Center back in '93. I love that. Let me just say that right off the bat. I love the retro feel that the Manhattan Center portion of this show had. Even just the way it came across on TV, the way it looked in HD. I thought it looked fantastic. I mean, a lot of people, have said it's not a great location for wrestling if you've ever been there before. The bathrooms and everything, it's kind of a dump. But in terms of how it came across on TV, I would love to see them run more shows in that building in the future. I mean, I guess it's not something you could do every month, but I really would be disappointed if they don't go back to that building, even if NXT. I think NXT could come and run the Manhattan Center. It could also run the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is right downstairs. But it's just such a great venue for wrestling. I noticed during the show, even Progress Wrestling, the Twitter account was asking people, hey, I wonder what the rent is. They were kind of teasing that they might want to run a show at the Manhattan Center, which, if they're serious about that, I'm down for that. I would love to see that. So I loved all of those aspects of the old school feel of the show from the Manhattan Center. Jim Ross and Jerry the King Lawler, Lawler wearing his old King costume, all that stuff I liked. That being said, one of the big stories coming out of the show, if not the biggest story coming out of the show, is going to be how badly they botched the handling of the show from the Manhattan Center. Now, one of the things that I was wondering going into the show, and I was just having a conversation earlier today with a friend who was also looking forward to the show tonight but didn't go, and I was saying, why haven't they announced that, like, during the down portions of the Manhattan Center show, where those portions are not airing on TV and they go back to Barclays, why wouldn't they have a gimmick where on your own network, you can have or air footage of some bonus matches, of some of the stuff that's quote-unquote dark on TV, and have these cut-ins on the network or something just to keep the action flowing for the people who actually paid a shitload of money for those tickets at the Manhattan Center. They didn't do that. Not only did they not do that, they didn't give those people a whole hell of a lot. This was an all-hands-on-deck show. There were no SmackDown house shows tonight. In fact, they had a lot of SmackDown talent at the show. At Barclays, we saw the Usos on TV tonight. We saw AJ Styles do a backstage promo at Mean Gene Okerlund, which, while it was cool, I'm sitting here wondering, okay, if I'm at the Manhattan Center and I see that they have AJ Styles and you've got the Usos and there's a ton of other talents on SmackDown who were probably there. The New Day, we saw the New Day there. I don't know, maybe if Sami Zayn and people like that were backstage. If nothing else, why can't you have SmackDown stars wrestling some matches at the Manhattan Center. Now, I understand there's some segments that you're going to want to show people on the screen. There's just going to be some big segments like that. But this was a recurring problem throughout the entire show, and people were getting pissed. They were getting very restless. At one point when they cut back to the Manhattan Center, I literally heard the crowd chanting, "We want something." I've never heard that chant before. They were chanting, "We want something," because they got nothing. They were getting nothing, and they were getting pissed. And I could tell you, I had the chance to go to the show tonight at the Manhattan Center, and I was very tempted. But the prices scared me off. I was like, I really want to go, but not for that price. A quote-unquote cheap ticket you can get for like $250. There are people who would pay that much for a WrestleMania ticket. Okay? And that was the low end of what I saw. A lot of people pay $300, $400, $500. There were people who paid over $1,000 to be at the Manhattan Center for the show tonight. Well, guess what? You paid $1,000 for a couple of nostalgia acts and a couple of cruiserweight matches. And oh, by the way, Bray Wyatt against Matt Hardy. So yeah, I can understand why those people would be pretty pissed off. And even more embarrassing, at one point, somebody got a photo of Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross both sleeping at the same time. King was clearly out. JR was out. I mean, that's going to be a meme for years to come. And I thought they were a little off their game, too. I mean, not the best night for JR and the King, but it's not like they had a whole lot to work with, if we're being honest here. So I mean, me personally, I'm kind of torn. I love the nostalgia portion of this. I really did like that. I don't want to complain about that too much, but I could see why people would be upset. And let me tell you something. Me sitting for free at home watching this in my living room, I think I made the right choice. Because I'm not interested in paying $500 for a chair. You know what I mean? I can go to friggin' Target and get a chair like that for $20. Anyway, all of that being what it is. Maybe the best segment of the entire show was the opening segment. I think the show peaked after the opening. Shane McMahon, Stephanie McMahon introduced the show. They bring out their father, Vince McMahon, the creator of Monday Night Raw. They present him with a plaque. It's this running joke that they started a GoFundMe campaign for the fans to help pay for this plaque, and Vince was very upset about this. He thought it was cheap looking and cheaply constructed, and we got heel Vince. Maybe one of the last times that we'll ever get heel Vince. I feel like every time Vince comes on TV, it's one of the last times we're going to get to see Vince McMahon sort of in his element. I mean, we got that segment a few months ago with Kevin Owens, and look, the guy's 72 years old. He's looking every bit of it. Not that he's not in great shape, but Vince looks old, because he is. So you never know when it's going to be the end of him on TV. But he was out there having fun. He was healing on Brooklyn, and I was laughing my ass off. And then out came Stone Cold Steve Austin. Place went nuts. I was just talking about this on the podcast the other day. The biggest pops, the biggest crowd reactions in Raw history, in company history, most of them belong to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Most of the top ones. You could add this one to the list. The place came unglued when Stone Cold came out. Didn't say a word. I don't think Austin uttered a single word in that opening segment. Popped for some beers, hands him over to Shane, hands him over to Vince. He ends up giving Shane a stunner. Vince turns on his son, says, he deserved it. He's drinking a beer, trying to get out of there in one piece. Of course, that didn't happen. And Austin did give Vince a stunner for old time's sake. And not for nothing, Vince has taken some pretty awful stunners before. This was probably one of the better stunners that I've ever seen Vince McMahon take, that he didn't completely just screw up. So he ate a stunner. Shane ate a second stunner. It's exactly what it had to be. People wanted to hear the glass shatter. They wanted to see Stone Cold come out and beat up the boss. They got what they came for. I really do think this show peaked with that opening segment. I think this was the best thing on the entire show. There was a women's tag match. I think it was an 8-woman tag. I was taking notes loosely throughout the show. I couldn't even tell you everybody who was in the match. I mean, I'm so wrapped up in the nostalgia. And maybe this is the problem. Maybe this was the problem with having this as your final Raw before one of your biggest pay-per-views of the year, is that all of that stuff with the current talent and the Royal Rumble took a back seat, right? Because everybody wanted to see all the stars. They wanted to see all the big names. All the guys who come across even now as much bigger stars than the talent today. They wanted to see Stone Cold. They wanted to see The Rock and Chris Jericho and The Undertaker and DX and all these different acts. That everything else kind of seems like an afterthought, to be perfectly honest with you. Anyway, this degenerated into a giant brawl. Women were throwing each other out over the top rope. hyping up the Women's Royal Rumble match on Sunday. Asuka was the final woman standing tall, which kind of makes me think she's not winning that match on Sunday. I'll do predictions on the podcast this weekend, but that was certainly the impression that I was left with here, with her being the last person standing. They did a fun little segment backstage, the obligatory WWE Legends segment where they do comedy and they try to shove everybody into one segment. So Kurt Angle was backstage. Jonathan Coachman showed up, no longer with ESPN. Harvey Whippleman in the Brooklyn Brawler, right? Would make sense for the Brawler to be in Brooklyn. Teddy Long, newly minted Hall of Famer, made an appearance. And what else? He danced. Didn't make any tag team matches, but he danced. We got Brother Love, who never seems to age. It must be the makeup. Got the white suit, got the rings on his finger. Remember Gorilla Monsoon used to say, I wonder if his fingers are green when he takes his jewelry off. We got the Boogeyman, who of course spit worms. This was pretty much what you would expect from a segment like this. Then we got The Undertaker. Now, when I talk about there being this feeling of disappointment coming out of the show, this maybe was the most disappointing segment of all. Now, I am of the camp that I do not want to see The Undertaker wrestle another match. I think his time has come and gone. He looked awful last year. It's embarrassing to me. Every year that goes by, he gets a little bit older. He gets a little bit slower. You hear all about all these injuries and the hips and everything else. And, I think it's time for the guy to ride off into the sunset and not, tarnish his legacy. He's got this amazing legacy in this company. And I just feel like every time he hangs on just a little bit more and has one more WrestleMania match, especially if they're like the one he had last year, he's not doing himself any favors. So I think the way that Undertaker character sort of went out at WrestleMania last year, leaving his gear in the ring, descending down to hell, lights go out, I thought was the perfect send-off. I mean, unless you're of the opinion that he should win on his way out, but otherwise, I don't think you could have booked it any better. So when they announced an appearance here, I thought to myself, well, there's one of two things. Either he's going to officially announce his retirement, or he's coming back for another WrestleMania match. And the rumors have been that it's going to be him and John Cena at WrestleMania 34. Now, just because nothing happened tonight doesn't mean that match is not happening. I still firmly believe that he's going to have a WrestleMania match, and it probably will be against John Cena. But you would never know that watching this segment here on this show. Now, it was cool to see him walk out at the Manhattan Center because he was on that first episode of Raw in that building. In fact, he headlined that show against Damian Demento. And so he was one of the few names, probably just him and Shawn Michaels and maybe Mike Chioda and Howard Finkel, or maybe some of the only original names to be in the same building tonight as they were back in 93. They let Howard Finkel introduce The Undertaker. Now, when I heard the Thing's voice, it warmed my heart because Howard Finkel never got a proper send-off. Frankly, he never should have been taken off TV when he was. And it was very interesting. You'll notice you heard his voice, right? You heard his voice during the intro for The Undertaker. You never saw him. And I actually texted somebody who was in the building. I texted Noah and I said, did you see Finkel anywhere? And he said, no, never saw him. So my guess is that was either pre-recorded or he was in the back and they did not want him on camera, which, given the last time I saw him at WrestleMania, which was WrestleMania 32, I've told this story on the podcast. This didn't air on TV, but at the end of the Hall of Fame segment where they trot out all the Hall of Famers, he had a lot of trouble getting out of the ring. I mean, he's gotten very heavy over the years. I don't know what health issues, if any, he may be having, but it was really sad seeing him need help. Because it was almost like he was trying to roll under the bottom rope and got stuck, and he needed like 5 people to come help him. So I love the Fink. God bless him. I hope everything's okay with him, but it was very telling. I thought you heard his voice, but you never actually saw him. So anyway, I've been of the opinion, and I've said this over and over and over again now for the longest time, I don't want to see The Undertaker wrestle another match at WrestleMania. It is unnecessary. And so I can't sit here and tell you that because nothing happened in this segment, and there was no WrestleMania match that was even teased, let alone announced. Oh, I'm so disappointed. If anything, I'm happy. I'm relieved. Because I'd like to think that means he's not going to have a match at WrestleMania. The only problem is, I don't believe that. And frankly, whether they were going to announce a WrestleMania match, or have him chokeslam somebody for old time's sake, or just come out and have him formally announce that he was going to rest in peace, he was going to retire, come out as himself. come out as big evil, whatever. They didn't do anything. This segment was confusing. It was underwhelming. It was disappointing, and it left you thinking, well, that can't possibly be it. I mean, maybe he's going to appear at the Barclays Center at the end of the show. That's why they put him on so early. That's what I thought. I mean, I thought for sure he was going to end up showing up at the other building, maybe doing something with Cena. Nothing happened. This was just Undertaker coming out. He talked about how for 25 years, all the legends that he's defeated and put down, and he mentioned Austin and Mick Foley, and he mentioned Kane. All of them failed. And he said, now it's time that, it's time to truly rest in peace. Now, I don't know if he said it's time for you to rest in peace or for I to rest in peace. The crowd was chanting one more match over him. He didn't seem very happy about that. He seemed kind of annoyed, to be honest with you. Like right when he was going for that final catchphrase, people started chanting one more match at him. And I'm like, you idiots, no. Like, what's wrong with you? So, but it came off to me because JR and King were very confused on commentary. Now, JR and King sounded confused for half the show. So that seemed to be a recurring theme. I mean, in and out of sleep, they weren't exactly all there. I took this to mean that at some point, you've got to rest in peace. It was almost like his way of saying that maybe he was done. But again, I could have completely misinterpreted this. I was not the only one who was left scratching his head when this segment was over. Like I said, even the announcers didn't quite know what to make of it. They were wondering if maybe it was some sort of threat to the other talent. This certainly was not positioned as something that was supposed to make you think that The Undertaker was retiring or finishing up. Even for a second there, it sounded almost like maybe he was going to declare himself an entrant in the Royal Rumble match. He didn't do that either. So I think this was just a way for them to get a big name on the show and get Undertaker in there because he was on the very first Raw, and they wanted him in that building. And look, if you were in the Manhattan Center, it must have been a big thrill to have The Undertaker walk out. A nice little touch, and I'm sure this was not done accidentally. He didn't come out in his traditional gear. He wasn't wearing the fedora, the hat, the robe, or the jacket, I should say, that he was wearing last time, the gloves. I'd like to think it was because he left them in the ring and he's not going to wear them ever again. Like, even if he wrestles at WrestleMania, he'll wear something different. Like, his clothes retired. Maybe he didn't retire. His outfit retired last year. Because he was wearing this sleeveless thing. Actually, not for nothing, I will say this, like, just physically speaking, he looked pretty good. He looked better than he did last year. But every year we say that, oh, Undertaker, he looks pretty good. No shit. The guy wrestles one match a year. He has an entire year to work out and get himself in shape. I would certainly hope that for one night he looks good. But we all fall for it every single year. Oh man, The Undertaker, look at this. He looks so much younger now. And then he wrestles, and we realize, oh, fooled ya. Right? Well, I'm not falling for that again. So, this can't possibly be the last time we see The Undertaker. This was a huge letdown. I'm almost sure we're still getting an Undertaker match at WrestleMania. But this was a very big disappointment. I don't know that you, frankly, could have booked an Undertaker segment worse than they did here. They just left people confused and underwhelmed more than anything else. We had a backstage segment with the APA. Their old door in the back. They were playing poker. They were playing poker with Heath Slater and Rhino. $1 Million Man showed up, threw a wad of cash on the table, did the cackle, had the $1 Million belt over his shoulder. Very cool. Conspicuous by his absence throughout this entire show. IRS. I thought they were saving his appearance for the end. So when the game was over, he'd show up and, collect taxes or something, but he never showed up. So that was kind of weird. They did a very quick segment introducing us to some of the, quote, greatest general managers in Raw history. John Laurinaitis came out. People booed. People power. They booed people power. Eric Bischoff, though, he got a tremendous ovation. And so did William Regal. William Regal got a good ovation, too. But Bischoff, when they hit his music, the Barclays Center popped huge. And frankly, you could argue Eric Bischoff is probably the best GM character that they ever had on Monday Night Raw, and probably one of the longer ones too. I mean, he was the GM probably for a good, 3 years? I mean, that's a pretty long time for somebody in that position. It feels like Kurt Angle's been GM forever, and it hasn't even been a year yet. And Bischoff looked good too. Bischoff looked pretty good. So at the very end of this, though, they introduced Daniel Bryan, who, of course, is currently the general manager of SmackDown. People went nuts for him. And I thought it was a cool little tease, which is what it was. I mean, it was a tease more than anything else. When The Miz came out, cut off Bryan's music, and The Miz came out for his match with Roman Reigns. And, of course, they had a little stare down on stage. That's a match that we really should have gotten. I know why we didn't, but they teased it again here. Just to remind you that heat never really left. That was left unresolved when Miz was drafted back over to Raw last year. So that led to the Intercontinental Championship match, Roman Reigns against The Miz. This was the one big match they promoted for this show. This was the biggest match on the entire show, probably the longest one too. I like this match. I thought this was a pretty good match. Bo Dallas was out there. Curtis Axel was out there. They tried to get involved. So much so that the referee finally said enough and kicked him out of ringside. Now, the key is that during part of this match where Roman was outside, it might have been the part of the match where Roman was probably beating on Dallas and Axel outside. Now, I didn't notice this until they showed the replay later on, but on the replay, you could see that in the background, Miz went and undid the middle turnbuckle. He loosened it, he ripped it off. It was a very, very subtle thing. You wouldn't have even noticed it unless you were in the building. This is important because it played into the finish. So once Axel and Dallas got kicked out, they were, just trying to get involved. Miz hit the skull-crushing finale, great near fall. People, they bought into it. They went nuts, they reacted great to it. You're thinking, okay, well, it was a nice effort. It was a nice try by The Miz, but obviously they're not putting the belt back on him. But little did we know, right? Little did we know. So Roman goes for a spear. Miz dodges him. Roman ends up going face first into the exposed turnbuckle. And Miz follows that up with another skull-crushing finale and gets the pin. And The Miz is the new Intercontinental Champion. I believe he is an 8-time Intercontinental Champion. He's got one reign less than the record holder, who is Chris Jericho, who is also on this show. But Miz is the champion again. And it's funny, I said months ago when Roman first won the Intercontinental Championship, I said on the sound off, even though lately I was doubting myself, and it sure looked like they were going for a champion versus champion thing at WrestleMania with Reigns and Lesnar. But when he first won the title, everybody was so pissed off. And I said, look, calm down. They're not going to do champion against champion at WrestleMania. I figured, he would lose it a month or two before Mania. I wasn't even sure he was going to hold it until the Rumble. And sure enough, here we are, 6 days before the Royal Rumble, and they took the title off of him. So now everybody can breathe a sigh of relief because he's no longer the Intercontinental Champion. They're not going to do champion against champion. Doesn't mean that Roman's not winning the Universal title, which I'm sure still pisses a lot of people off. But I think it was the right move to make. There was no reason for him to hold that title hostage. I know some people think, it's a big draw, champion versus champion, WrestleMania 6. No, it's not. No, it's not. And let me tell you, that meant a lot more in 1990 than it would mean today. I'm not even sure anybody would even believe that Brock Lesnar would even win the Intercontinental Championship. He doesn't even care. Why would he even care? You want to believe that the other person, they want to win that championship. Does anybody even buy into the idea that Brock wants the belt he has now? Let alone another one? He doesn't give a shit. Miz, who is probably in the middle of the best run of his career, I thought he had a great year last year, in what I think was his 10th year, if I'm not mistaken. Him and Kofi both, 10 years, celebrating 10 years in WWE. But now it opens up Miz to be able to defend that title against somebody else at WrestleMania. Finn Balor would seem like a good choice to me. He's getting a little bit of a push now, part of the whole Balor Club thing. I think promoting Balor and Miz for Mania is one way to go. I don't know if that's what they're going to do. There was a time where it looked like Jason Jordan might be the one to be in that spot, but obviously they've gone in a different, better direction with him. So Balor seems to be the right choice as far as I can tell right now. We had a peep show segment. Christian was there, Edge was not. He is out of the country, I believe, filming either a movie or a TV show. So Christian was there. He was on TV for all of 10 seconds, it felt like. He was doing a peep show interview segment with Seth Rollins and Jason Jordan. And if you have been on the fence about the Jason Jordan thing, not sure if it's going to work or not, tonight should put all of those questions to rest, because whatever they're doing with Jordan is working. Clearly they're positioning him as somebody that you are supposed to hate. And you could tell he's having fun out there with this. When you get that kind of reaction that he got, they would not even let him speak. I haven't seen them do that to somebody probably since Vicky Guerrero, because she used to get nuclear heat. And I hesitate to say that he got Vicky Guerrero heat tonight, but it was pretty bad. And he seemed to be enjoying every second of it. Finally, he was able to say a few words. People hated his guts. And so I'm very curious to see where this leads. Is it going to lead to Rollins and Jordan at WrestleMania? Is it going to lead to Jordan against Kurt Angle? Is it going to be some kind of tag match? How much longer are they going to keep this team together? From the looks of it, I don't know that they're going to be tag champs beyond the Rumble. I mean, that may be where that run comes to an end, especially when you consider that during this segment, Sheamus and Cesaro came out, whole brawl erupted, and Rollins accidentally hit Jordan with a flying knee. So believe me, I'm sure that's going to factor into things here. But the key coming out of the segment is the crowd reaction to Jordan. It's working. It's working. He's already one of the biggest heels in the entire company. Bray Wyatt and Woken Matt Hardy. This was probably the first major thing at the Manhattan Center in like an hour. People were practically ready to riot at this point. There were people tweeting live reaction videos from the Manhattan Center. People were starting bullshit chants. It was getting rowdy in that building. And so finally we got a match. Bray Wyatt comes out, Woken Matt Hardy. They've been promoting this for how long now? A month? More than a month? They've been building to this. We didn't know when we were going to get the match. We got it here. We got it on the go-home show to the Royal Rumble. And didn't go very long. In fact, this match was a disappointment. This match was a great microcosm for the entire show. It was a disappointment. And Bray just, beat him after a few minutes with Sister Abigail, and that was it. Now, apparently, before the live crowd, Jeff Hardy made an appearance. Brother Nero made an appearance, and people, gave him a nice reaction. We didn't see that on TV. But not a whole lot to it. This was pretty basic stuff, and I'm kind of surprised they just not only gave the match away, but just a clean finish like that. Just like that, 1, 2, 3. We had a little segment backstage with Elias and Chris Jericho. Hot off his match with Kenny Omega. Wrestle Kingdom. In fact, Jericho was here wearing his Alpha shirt, his Alpha Club shirt, which is apparently available at Hot Topic, a Hot Topic near you. Not that I would know that, but there he is on TV wearing the same shirt that he just wore for his New Japan feud. Jericho can pretty much do whatever he wants, I guess. Little comedy stuff. He had a guitar. He sung a song. He insulted Elias. He never got physical. He never came out before the live crowd, at least on TV, to do anything. This was a very quick sort of one-and-done appearance. But people were very happy to see him. Now, this was a big night for Elias because not only did he have a backstage segment with Jericho, he immediately transitioned into a segment out in the ring with John Cena in Brooklyn. And he was singing a song. He even started to interact with Jimmy Fallon, who was in the front row. Out came Cena. And the point of all this was this led to Elias giving Cena what looked like a pretty stiff a stiff guitar shot right to the back of the neck. It wasn't even in the back. It was like right, like above the shoulder blade, right in the neck. He just whacked him with this. And I'm like, oh boy, that is not the guy you want to be risking injury for. You know what I mean? Like, I'm talking about for Elias. That's not the kind of guy you want to be reckless with. And, Cena's had neck surgery before. So, anyway, but he whacked him good with that guitar. And it was pretty obvious to me coming out of the segment that they're sort of basically just substituting Samoa Joe, his spot, for Elias here. Samoa Joe is down with an injury. He was on a podcast, I believe, a few days ago talking about the injury. And he said it's a week-to-week thing. He's not even sure when he's going to be able to come back. For sure, he's out of the Royal Rumble. Last I saw, he was off all the lineups through the middle of March. We don't even know if he'll be at WrestleMania this year. And so on the one hand, it sucks because Samoa Joe absolutely should be at WrestleMania. He wasn't there last year. This would be his first. He's had a pretty, he's had a lot of momentum the last several months going his way. And then this foot injury happens. And it pisses me off, too, because it happened in a meaningless nothing 2-minute match on TV with Rhino. Like a match that didn't even need to happen. You know, he could have come out, cut a promo. He did a promo after the match. Why couldn't he just come out and do a promo? That was the promo where he entered himself into the Rumble. He threatened John Cena, I'm going to eliminate you. You're going to be the first person I eliminate. If they would have just cut the match out with Rhino, we could have avoided all of this. But shit happens. What are you going to do? So Elias appears to be the beneficiary of Samoa Joe's injury. Now, the more I think about that statement, I think to myself, is he really? Like, is he really the beneficiary of Samoa Joe's injury, or did Joe dodge a bullet? Because this is the second time now that he was supposed to feud with John Cena and has sort of gotten out of it due to injury. Part of me, small part of me, wonders if that isn't to his benefit. So maybe it's more a case of Joe dodging a bullet as opposed to Elias being the beneficiary here. Time will tell. We've seen this song and dance with Cena before. It gets Elias some TV time, but what happens after the Rumble? That's what I worry about. We had... this was ridiculous. So this is another example here of me scratching my head wondering what they were thinking, because up to this point, it was a running joke about what was going on or not going on at the Manhattan Center. They have a cameo appearance here from the Dudley Boyz. Now you would think that's a gimme to put at the Manhattan Center. Nope. They had them come out in Brooklyn. And they had them come out to interrupt this, again, meaningless tag team match, which was clearly only designed to allow the Dudleys to come out. It was Titus O'Neil, I think it was Titus O'Neil and Apollo Crews, I think, against Rhino and Heath Slater. And so the Dudleys come out. They got a nice reaction. It died out pretty quickly, you know, because we've seen the Dudleys and Bubba, you know, make this sort of return before. In fact, it was in Brooklyn at Barclays, I believe, not all that long ago that the Dudley Boyz made their big return. It's like, you can only milk that pop so many times. So they came out, they got a nice little reaction. Of course, people did the whole get the tables thing. And they put Heath Slater through a table. And Devon went up and did the wazap, and he did all that. And although Michael Cole, or was it Michael Cole or Corey Graves, called it something different. Called it like the dilly dilly or something. I'm not up on all this lingo. I'm sorry. I don't know what the hell he was talking about. But I just thought it was kind of a waste, honestly. And I'm thinking again, why couldn't you do that at the other building? Throw those people a bone. Although I will say, I'm sitting there at this point of the show thinking, man, like, not that it wouldn't have been cool to be back in that setting, but I really, by this point in the show, was very happy with my decision not to go to the show. I was perfectly content sitting in my living room, drink in hand, just watching the show for free. And I didn't think that would be my reaction. I thought when this show was over, I was going to be pissed that I wasn't there. I'm not. I'm relieved. We had AJ Styles and Mean Gene Okerlund. I mentioned this was back at Barclays. They had a little backstage segment together. Mean Gene was on camera just very briefly. Asked AJ a question. AJ started his promo out mimicking Hulk Hogan. It's like, well, let me tell you something, Mean Gene. Cut a little promo on Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Not much to it. People were very happy to see AJ, although he wasn't out before the live crowd. So finally, we go back to the Manhattan Center. Finally, right? They remembered that they were running a second show here in this other building. And I do wonder, some of you were tweeting me going, I wonder if it was part of WWE's plot to lock all of the Smart fans into the Manhattan Center. Sort of just lock them in there. And then have the real show in Brooklyn at Barclays. But they go back to the Manhattan Center for the DX reunion. This is DX reunion number 976. And everybody's got their little glow sticks. So this is like the 2006 version of DX, which I wasn't much a fan of. But I guess a lot of people are. By this point, it just seemed like a lot of the energy was out of the building, and it's not hard to see why. Again, the reaction was okay, but it wasn't the kind of reaction that you would expect to seeing Shawn Michaels and Triple H, and they brought out the New Age Outlaws, they brought out X-Pac, and then they bring out Razor Ramon. And it wasn't really Razor Ramon, it was Razor Ramon's theme song. Scott Hall was on X-Pac's podcast a few days ago and said that he got a text message saying, hey, bring your gear. You know, kind of teasing that he was going to show up as Razor Ramon, have the jewelry around the neck, maybe even be wearing the tights. And I said I wasn't really sure what kind of physical shape Hall was in. Like, I know Waltman's in pretty good shape and he still does some matches. But I didn't quite know what to expect with Scott Hall. I just was hoping he would be lucid and okay. And so he comes out and he was wearing the Outsiders jacket with the little, I guess, blood or whatever it is. But it's the same jacket he was wearing. If you remember that infamous incident at the Independent show where he was completely out of it. He had a hospital brace. This was like the low point for him. He had the hospital bracelet on. He was all doped up on something. Just absolutely awful. The lowest of low points for Scott Hall. Every time I see that jacket now, I associate that with that incident. So kind of unfortunate, I thought, for him to choose that jacket, but he came out wearing that jacket to the Razor music, and then they cut to commercial. They just faded to commercial. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? This is actually one of the moments of the show I was waiting for. We get the Razor Ramon music. He's coming out. They cut to commercial. And I know maybe it's not their fault. It's a network thing, but still, that sucked. That cannot happen. Not during his entrance. You can't be doing that. So they come back. Thankfully, he's in the ring. At least they didn't cut his promo out of the show. He got to talk. Everybody cheered. It was a nice little moment. And the Balor Club came out. Finn Balor, Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows. We have a little face-off. And they all do the too sweet. That brings out the Revival. I thought they were just coming out to cut a promo and then get their asses kicked, but they had a match. At this point, by the way, it's already 11 o'clock, so they're clearly going overtime. Very short match with Anderson and Gallows beating the Revival with the Magic Killer, which Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler clearly didn't know what the move was. And look, I understand that they're not full-time announcers in WWE anymore, but I look at that and I just say to myself, there's no excuse, especially for Lawler. Lawler is brought in to do those pre-show and like the post-show stuff sometimes on the network. Like, he's actually doing more for the company now even than JR is. But there really is no excuse. You got to at least know what their finishing move is, for God's sakes. You know? So I actually thought that was kind of embarrassing, to be honest with you. So they hit their finishing move. JR and King say nothing. They win the match. And Billy Gunn ends the segment by doing, if you're not down with that, we got 2 words for you. Everybody says, suck it, and so long from the Manhattan Center. We go back to Barclays for the main event segment, which again was quite the disappointment, I must say. Kurt Angle came out with a bunch of legends. The APA, Bischoff, Brother Love is out there because, hey, if I want to bring backup with me, I'm bringing Brother Love, and I'm bringing Harvey Whippleman, and I'm bringing the Brooklyn Brawler. These are the kind of people that came out here to surround the ring for this final segment, which was going to be some sort of face-off with Brock Lesnar, Kane, and Braun Strowman. Now let me ask you a question. A week ago on TV, right? Actually, let's go back 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago on TV, Braun Strowman went nuts. He nearly murdered Brock Lesnar and Kane. Pulled down this giant metal structure, tried to kill them. Kane was left for dead as they were wheeling Brock Lesnar into an ambulance. Nobody gave a shit about Kane. Remember that whole thing? Last week, Kurt Angle fired Braun Strowman because he claimed that Braun created an unsafe work environment. This man was so dangerous and so unstable, he could no longer be employed. Except Stephanie called and overruled him and rehired him an hour later. Inexplicably. We still haven't gotten an explanation as to why. Apparently, Stephanie doesn't give a shit about the safety of her employees. Or independent contractors, I should say. So, consider all of that. Why would Kurt Angle think it was a good idea to have Brock Lesnar, Kane, and Braun Strowman just come out and be in the ring together at the same time? Why would he think that's a good idea? I don't know. I made the comment on the podcast this weekend. Last week, Kurt called Stephanie McMahon Stephanie McCran. Now this. Somebody needs to give Kurt some sort of psych evaluation or a cognitive exam because I'm not sure what this guy is thinking. So, of course, Brock wasn't even in the ring. Braun is already going nuts. He lays out Kane. Brock makes a beeline, knocks down Braun. He gives Kane an F5. Braun gets in the ring. So now it's Brock and Braun. And anyway, this whole thing ended with Braun giving Brock a running power slam through a table outside the ring. They played his music. They were clearly running overtime. That's how the show ended. A very anticlimactic finish to what I think overall was a very anticlimactic show. You can pick out some really cool moments. The Austin thing, I think, was the most fun I had watching the show all night. I'm a big fan of some of the nostalgia they did tonight. I think there's a place for it. And I stand by what I said earlier about the Manhattan Center. It's a really cool venue for wrestling shows. And even if it's just NXT, I really hope they utilize that building more often. I thought it came across great. Just in terms of look, it came across great in HD on TV tonight. But boy, did they botch this up. Boy, did they really did. And you can talk all you want to about, well, those people get what they deserve. They had to know that this was going to happen. Did they? I don't think they did. They have plenty of talent. They could have filled a lot of holes during downtime at the Manhattan Center for people who paid a shitload of money to watch that show. It's inexcusable, frankly. It is inexcusable to have that much downtime, during a show where people paid so much money to see live acts and live action. You have a ring, for God's sakes, right there. And they dropped the ball. And it sucks because I kind of like the whole idea of doing it from dual locations. And now they probably will never do it again. But it's their own fault. Because there were other ways they could have handled this, and they chose not to for whatever reason. And those people really got screwed. And I think those people they got some cool moments. They got to see The Undertaker and a DX reunion, and, Matt Hardy and Bray. Whatever. They had some stuff, but they got a real, a legitimate gripe, I think, with WWE. I'd be infuriated if that were me. If I paid $250 for a ticket, I'd be infuriated if I paid $50 for a ticket. Can't be doing that. And if you strip away all the nostalgia, this was not a good show. I thought Roman and Miz had a good match. I'm happy they took the title off Roman. Beyond that, and I guess I kind of like the Elias stuff, like with Jericho, but that was so brief. Otherwise, this was a nothing show. Without the nostalgia, this was a nothing show. And this was your final Raw heading into the second biggest pay-per-view of the year. Now think about that. This was the final, promotion as far as Raw goes. We have SmackDown tomorrow, but the final bit of promotion for the Royal Rumble. And ask yourself this question. Honestly, ask yourself this question. Are you more excited now for the Royal Rumble than you were before this show started tonight? Did this show get you more excited, more motivated, beyond whatever your normal level of excitement is for the Rumble? Did it get you more interested in seeing the Royal Rumble on Sunday? I say no. So by that measure, as a go-home show, it was a failure. Let me check out these poll results here. This is going to be, I have a feeling this is going to be brutal. Let's take a look here. Wow. Well, normally when I put these Raw polls up, I don't get quite this many votes this quickly. This poll hasn't even been up a full hour. We already have over 2,500 votes. 31% thumbs up, 69% thumbs down. Now, this poll's going to be up for another day and a half or so you can still vote, and that total may go up, it may go down, but 31 up, 69 down, that tells you right there a lot of very unhappy people coming out of this show. But we have the Royal Rumble on Sunday. I always like the Rumble, even though they've botched it a few times in the past, but I'm a big sucker for the Rumble match. I want to sit here and say that, man, it's really hard to mess up the Royal Rumble, but we've seen them do it before. And we kind of saw them botch up what should have been a slam dunk show tonight. And so if they botch that up, wow, I don't know as far as Sunday goes. We have the NXT show on Saturday. That should be really good. And then the Rumble on Sunday. And I'll wait until this weekend to do my predictions. Although, if you heard the show that I did yesterday, you did hear me float this idea when I was talking about the TakeOver show. Floated a little idea about Aleister Black debuting in the Rumble, maybe even winning the Rumble. I'm liking that idea. The more that I think about it, we'll see what happens there. Loses on Saturday, debuts on Sunday, gets the shock win, goes on to WrestleMania. At least it would be something different. Follow me on Twitter at Solomonster. You can listen to the full podcast. You know where to go. thesolomonster.com. They're also on iTunes and Stitcher, all the usual platforms. You can get the full shows. Episode 532 with my NXT TakeOver review and Royal Rumble predictions. That'll be this weekend. I'm sure by then there'll be more on this Enzo Amore story. which broke today. WWE has suspended him pending further details of the investigation into whether or not he did what he is accused of doing. He was accused of rape. That's a pretty serious allegation. Everybody's already forming their opinions on this woman who nobody knows. But, the whole innocent until proven guilty thing, it goes for both parties. But for now, WWE has suspended him, and they didn't announce anything as far as the Cruiserweight title go. They didn't really have time. I mean, this whole thing, I'm sure, caught them off guard. They had this big show tonight with all these cameos and legends, so I didn't really expect them to announce anything as far as what's going to happen now. Because they have to strip him, you would think, right? They've got to strip him. You don't know how long he's going to be out for on suspension. You've got this championship in limbo. So, as I see it, you got to get the title off him somehow. Cedric Alexander was next in line for a title shot. Maybe they do a match with Cedric against somebody else. Maybe they do a battle royal. We'll see. Maybe tomorrow they'll make some kind of announcement. So, more on that this weekend. Until then, be well, stay safe. If you like what you hear, give this video a thumbs up. I'll be doing a Royal Rumble Sound Off Extra after the pay-per-view this Sunday right here back on YouTube. Until then, take care, guys.